Scotland's serial killers. Angus Sinclair. He was just a boy when he killed for the first time. Angus Sinclair was 16 when he lured 7-year-old Catherine Rehill into a basement in Glasgow's St George's Cross, sexually assaulted her and left her for dead. He was jailed for culpable homicide and sent to a juvenile facility. He only served 6 years despite dire warnings he would kill again. When he walked out of custody at 21, he returned to life as if nothing had happened. He got married, became a father, and worked as a painter and decorator, but behind the mask of normality was a calculating predator. By the 1970s, Sinclair had partnered with his brother-in-law, Gordon Hamilton, and together they embarked on one of the most disturbing killing sprees in Scottish criminal history. They cruised the streets of Edinburgh and Glasgow in a camper van, preying on women. Their method was opportunistic and violent. In 1977, as Scotland celebrated the Queen's Silver Jubilee, 2 teenage girls vanished after a night out. Christine Eadie and Helen Scott, both 17, were last seen alive leaving the World's End pub on Edinburgh's Royal Mile. Their bodies were discovered miles apart. Christine was found on a beach at Gosford Bay. Helen's body was dumped near Haddington. Both had been gagged, bound and brutally raped. Christine had been strangled with her own tights. Helen had suffered multiple injuries and was left partially clothed in undergrowth. The violence was frenzied, and the double murder shocked the country. A huge police investigation followed, but the trail went cold. There were no eyewitnesses, no viable suspects, and no usable forensic evidence. The case was filed as unsolved, but in 1978, a year after the World's End killings, he struck again. Mary Gallagher, 17, was walking to work in Glasgow when she vanished. Her body was found hours later in a back court near Springburn. She had been sexually assaulted, strangled and dumped. Police again had no suspect. Sinclair had left DNA on her tights, but in 1978, no one could test it. He wouldn't face justice for Gallagher's murder until 2001. By that point, Sinclair was already behind bars, serving a life sentence for the rape and murder of a child. That conviction led detectives to re-examine his past. New forensic techniques linked Sinclair to the murder of Mary Gallagher. He was charged and convicted, but his name would forever be tied to the killings of Christine Eadie and Helen Scott. The World's End case was reopened in the early 2000s. DNA found on both victims and submitted to the national database matched Sinclair. Hamilton was identified as the second man, but he had died in 1996. In 2007, Sinclair was charged with the murders, but the trial collapsed. The judge ruled the Crown had failed to prove Sinclair committed the killings beyond a reasonable doubt. There was public outrage. The girls' families were devastated. That failure, however, helped push through changes in the law. In 2011, Scotland's centuries-old double jeopardy rule was overturned. A person could now be retried if new and compelling evidence came to light. In 2014, Sinclair was back in the dock. This time, the case was watertight. Blood, semen and hair samples from the original investigation were retested and matched to Sinclair. Advances in forensic science had caught up. The jury heard how the 2 girls had been picked up by Sinclair and Hamilton, taken to a remote location in East Lothian, raped, tortured and murdered. The details were harrowing. Sinclair showed no emotion. He was found guilty and sentenced to life with a minimum of 37 years. The longest sentence ever handed down in a Scottish court at the time. He was 69. It meant he would die in prison. At least 6 other deaths were linked to Sinclair and Hamilton, but without confessions or surviving suspects, no charges could be brought. Sinclair never admitted to the World's End murders or cooperated with police. He died in Glenocle Prison in March 2019, aged 73. His remains were disposed of at sea without ceremony, his death marking the end of a case that haunted Scotland for more than 4 decades. Angus Sinclair's name now sits alongside the most notorious killers in Scotland's history, and the World's End killings had a lasting legacy. They triggered major changes in Scottish criminal law, shaped the way historic cases are investigated, and brought closure to some families who thought justice might never come.